Should we get used to oil at 80 or 90? Or are you with a school of thought that normal is much higher and we're just on borrowed time down here?
I'm not sure we're necessarily on borrowed time, but I do think that for the current picture that yes, higher is definitely a new normal. And when you look at the changes that are going on in the U.S. in terms of oil production and new regulations and different corporate outlooks towards increasing production, there's definitely a trend towards less dynamic responses to the market, higher costs in terms of production, slower increases in production. And so I think we definitely could be looking at a somewhat higher basis in terms of oil. And as you've been mentioning, inflation also does play a role in that.
And can I just pick up on some of this and ask you how durable this decline is going to be? We're south of $4 a gallon for gas in this country right now, on average. We've seen numbers decline every single day going back to the middle of June. It's pretty impressive stuff. Secretary Granholm over the weekend to CNN hoping it continues. Do you have that same feeling that it will continue?
Well, I think that you also have to remember that seasonality is still a very important component in gasoline demand and gasoline prices. And generally around this time, we do see a slight dip in demand. School is starting for large portions of the country, and the summer driving season is coming to an end. But I think that what will really give us a good sense of where things are headed in terms of gasoline prices and demand is as we hit the fall, as we hit September, when refineries have to go into their maintenance season. I think we'll get a good picture of whether demand is still strong, whether it's going to drop off, because typically prices decline. But will refineries feel secure enough to even go offline to do maintenance? Or will they feel pressure to keep churning out more and more barrels and kind of put off needed maintenance? And that could be a significant factor for gasoline prices for the rest of the year.
How big of a swing factor, Ellen, is COVID zero and China ending that after the National People's Congress later this year?
That would be a huge deal if China ended its COVID zero policy, because essentially the market is always kind of on edge. Is China going to shut down? Is this major city going to shut down? What's demand going to look like out of China? And to some extent, you get a little bit of a sense when they issue their import quotas, especially for the independent refineries, but how much oil they're going to be importing. But at the stroke of a pen, they could basically crush domestic demand. And so I think that if they do get rid of this zero COVID policy, I think that will be quite telling for the market, especially for the next year.
Well, but how tight is production right now? How tight are supplies? And that's, I guess, the question that I have is how resilient is the market to a potential shock in demand one way or another? Right now, we're seeing cooling demand. How low would those prices be if it weren't for that tightness?
Yeah, I think we could definitely potentially see prices, down in the 60s if it weren't for that tightness. But on the other hand, part of the tightness is what is causing prices to cool down. The fact that they were so high because things were tight. And then we did see some demand destruction. We are seeing continued fears of global recession. Even if we do get more data out of Europe and Europe does plunge into recession, which I think most people think is going to happen, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're still not going to need oil, because electricity prices there are still so high, and that could cause them to switch to some oil.
Ellen, the distinction to me in, say, a given 100-page research report is the potential demand of the Pacific Rim, and even the Pacific Rim ex-China. Do you believe in that they're going to have the buoyant boom over 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? It's going to pop oil to a permanence above $100 a barrel?
I don't believe that that's necessarily going to be the case. I definitely think that there's room for an economic boom there, but I wouldn't say that that's definitely going to cause oil to stay above 100, especially if you're looking at, say, a major decline in European demand, if you're looking at economic weakness in America. Those could all be significant factors. And also remember that when the middle of December comes, or early December, that's when these sanctions on Russian oil are supposed to take effect. And I think that will be very telling for where oil's going in the next year and in 2023 and how well these sanctions are actually enforced or adhered to.